All right, welcome to the Dales Report. Happy to be joined with the CEO of Field Trip Health, Ronan Levy, back to the show. Mr. Levy, how are things? How's the summer been?
Summer has been good. Lots of exciting stuff, that's for sure. Definitely put the nice little cherry on top last week when we got the approval from NASDAQ.
Yeah, no kidding. When you talk about nice things going on, that's an understatement. So what's the feedback? What's the excitement, obviously? I know we've been talking with you off and on for the better course of a year, but it's a big step in the right direction, is it not?
Yeah, it's a huge step. I mean, we've had our heads down. It's probably don't stop to smell the roses nearly enough. Maybe that's a lesson we have to take, but we've had our heads down. I mean, NASDAQ was always the goal from day one of listing on the CSC last October.
Yep.
To the TSX about a month ago, now to the NASDAQ. I mean, this has always been the path, and great kudos to our legal and finance teams for getting us across the line so efficiently. And one of the things that I don't think is appreciated about what we achieved is that we actually got approved to list on the NASDAQ Global Select tier. We're the first psychedelics company to be on the Global Select.
Maybe talk about that. What does that mean?
Yeah, it just means that the level of scrutiny that was placed on our application, as well as the expectations going forward, were just held at a higher rank. There's going to be less actually scrutiny. I mean, there's going to be higher standards held to us, but less scrutiny in terms of our operations, because we are at that higher tier, of caliber of company. And so, it makes our lives a little bit easier from an operational perspective, but certainly it's great cachet for us, because we can now count ourselves amongst Apple and Alphabet and Biogen, and like truly the world-class companies are out there. Field Trip is now in that caliber of company.
Good for you. So within a span of 7 weeks, as you said, you commenced trading on the TSX. Now this news with the NASDAQ. So first off, did you see a bump in institutional investor based upon the listing on the TSX in June? And with this latest news, what do you anticipate, I guess, concerning the U.S. institutional interest once you do begin trading on the NASDAQ?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of clarity as to what kind of institutional bump we had after listing on the TSX, but we certainly did see volumes increase substantially after listing on the TSX, and we're certainly anticipating that here as well. It's no secret that as wonderful as an exchange as the TSX is, there are just a lot of US and global investors who don't invest in TSX companies. And, even something as simple as Robinhood, you can't be on the Robinhood platform as a publicly traded company unless you're on a US exchange like the NASDAQ or the NYSE. So it's just going to expand the scope of investors and the scale of investors who can invest. And we're also very cognizant, having come out of the cannabis industry, where I know back when Canopy first announced that it was going public, I guess it was Tweed then, part of the impetus was to elevate the conversation and expand the conversation around cannabis to a much larger audience, because as a publicly traded company, not only do you have to disclose, you also have to get your message out there. It's actually an obligation. It's a fiduciary obligation to do that. And that helped build awareness in the conversation and got more people talking about cannabis. And certainly the same is going to happen here as well, as more companies continue to elevate to publicly traded companies and ultimately to the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. This becomes a global conversation a lot easier than it does if you're just a Canadian securities listed.
Yeah, of course. Company. So you joined, I know Simon had mentioned last week, a conditional approval on the New York Stock Exchange as well, but you're now into an echelon of MindMed, Atai Life Sciences, Compass Pathways, a lot of momentum obviously building with the research that they're doing obviously right now. We are in the midst of right now, from an investor standpoint, it seems like the summer doldrums, a little investor fatigue to the market, I would say. Do you agree with that? And if so, what can you share being a CEO of a company that you're seeing day to day that can maybe get investors excited on how this industry will perform here in the back end of 2021?
Yeah, certainly the first half of this year, the first quarter in particular, it was IPO central, right? You talk to all of the major US banks and they were just overwhelmed with deals, particularly in the pharma and biotech space. So it's not surprising that there's a little bit of fatigue out there, and people are trying to enjoy a summer after what's been one of the most interesting years in probably the last century or so. So it's no surprise, but the psychedelics industry and field trip in particular, we're primed to, I think, ride what's going to be a massive wave of momentum. We're dealing with the pandemic and the fallout from that, right?
Of
And so
course.
there's increased interest in mental health and mental health treatments, and certainly with our ketamine-assisted therapies in the clinic and what we're offering in our clinics right now, we're creating real impact and transformational experiences for our patients. So we're going to continue to see that evolve, but as the research, as MAPS gets through its second phase 3, as Compass completes its phase 2B, as the evidence supporting access to psychedelic therapies continues to mount, I think the interest is going to be overwhelming. This is not just another drug. It's not just another blockbuster drug. This is a fundamental revolution in mental health, and I actually think it's going to be a fundamental revolution in how we think about healthcare overall, as we start to recognize how functional medicine and integrative medicine may actually be far superior in many respects to allopathic medicine. And functional medicine and integrative medicine rely on mental health and the connection between body and mind and body and spirit, if you want to choose those words, as part of your overall healthcare. And when we think about that and the size of just the mental health industry right now and the cost of depression and anxiety on our global economy, this isn't just a new drug. This is truly, I think, a new class of care that is going to have such major waterfall fall-on effects that I genuinely believe that the psychedelics industry is going to be one of the most significant and impactful industries globally over the next 10 to 20 years. So there's a lot of upside built into that.
Well, I want to focus our attention now to your research. And although your company is probably best known for its network of assisted therapy wellness centers across major cities in North America, it's your discovery division that actually is garnering a lot of attention. The psilocybin-like novel compound called FT104 is expected to enter into a phase 1 clinical trial before the end of the year. So do you expect your drug development capabilities will become more in focus with investors as you exit the preclinical stage?
Absolutely. There's a couple of things that are happening right now with FT104. One of the reasons that people aren't as familiar with FT104 as, say, the work Compass is doing, as Cybin is doing, is because FT104 is still an abstract concept. We haven't actually disclosed what the underlying molecule is, but when we do, people will understand why we're so bullish about it. So just going to give it a little bit more context, a little bit more tangibility. And I think with that, you're going to see an increasing level of excitement happening around that. But what's really exciting right now with Field Trip and really where we're starting, why we built the company the way we did was to leverage synergies. We're talking about experiential medicine when we talk about psychedelics, where the setting and the therapy matters just as much as the drug does, to be quite honest, and the therapeutic outcomes, at least based on the evidence to date. And so we built Field Trip with these two divisions, the clinics, Field Trip Health and Field Trip Discovery, the R&D arm. Now with 7 clinics operating and a clear path to having 20 locations operating or under construction before the year end, these synergies start to manifest a lot better. We're bringing in a new VP of clinical development, and part of that, the focus of that role, is to really use the scale we're starting to develop with our clinics to really dive deep into understanding what is it about what is it about setting, what is it about the therapeutic protocols that lead to the best outcomes. And what this enables us to do is 2 key things. First of all, it helps us de-risk our drug development strategy because we can develop the best protocols, because we'll know what aspects of setting and therapy create the best outcomes. We can feed that into our drug development pipeline and our trial design for FT104 to maximize the likelihood of success of FT104 and other drug development pipeline projects, which we hope to announce later this year. So we're going to be able to design trials better than any other company in the psychedelics industry based on the data and knowledge. I believe so. Maybe it's a bit of an overstatement, but that's part of the strategy because we're going to have all of this knowledge about what really creates impact in the experiential aspect of this experiential medicine. Secondly, because as we continue to work with ketamine, and as we certainly plan to work with MDMA and MAPS as soon as that becomes available, and Compass pathways and Cybin and all that kind of stuff, we're going to have a unique insight into which populations and which indications are not actually being met as clinically effectively as others, which is going to help us inform our drug development strategy, because we may find certain populations are not being served by the existing roster of medicines, and that can help us inform the drug development strategy. So those 2 synergies, we're just starting to leverage. We're just starting to implement them because with our scale with the clinics now, we actually have enough people coming through. We have enough data. We have enough information to structure research around that, as well as collect large amounts of data to help inform it. So in many ways, the synergies of this model are just getting started. And so we're incredibly excited about that potential as well.
Well, when you look at your data, let's say results do come back favorably. Consumers constantly ask, what about cost? So let's focus on insurance. We've recently heard from industry competitors receiving clearance from insurance companies to cover the costs of ketamine treatments in clinics. So obviously, this development could be very, very beneficial for your business model if insurance coverage becomes the standard. So maybe provide us an update, like where are we with this? And do you have any insight or any update as to how this is developing? Meaning, are you starting to see insurers look at the science, and are they more receptive with potentially adding this to coverage plans later on in the future?
I certainly anticipate so. I mean, we were, I think, the first company to actually get insurance coverage for Canadian military veterans through Medicare Blue Cross. And we are just about to open the doors to our Fredericton, New Brunswick clinic, which we built specifically to support military veterans because there's a large base population of military veterans in New Brunswick there. So that news is obviously positive. The more coverage there is, the better it is for Canadians, for all people, as well for the industry. But what we're also starting to see on the other side is we've been putting a lot of effort into exploring reimbursement and coverage in the US, where it's a little bit of more of a complex system, to say the least. And the feedback we've been getting so far has been genuinely positive. I mean, it's not entirely surprising when you look at some of the studies that suggest for every 1 point improvement in the PHQ-9 score, which is one of the most commonly used metrics for assessing depression. For every 1 point improvement on that, you have a 1.6% corresponding increase in productivity from that person. So
how does
addressing
that work
depression? Then? Well, people who are depressed or anxious tend to have lower productivity from less effective time at the office to more missed days at work, right? So you reduce depression, you reduce anxiety. When you see the results that we're having with our ketamine-assisted therapy sessions, which are showing incredible results, far superior to SSRIs and conventional treatments, it's not surprising that employers may actually want to get behind this, not because it's just the right thing to do and providing care for their employees it's just the humanitarian decision. It actually is going to create dividends because an employee population with better mental health is actually a more productive employee population. An employee population with better mental health is actually less of a drain on other medical resources than people who have depression and anxiety. So from a cost, just from a purely economic perspective, I think a lot of employers and insurers are going to be looking very carefully at ketamine-assisted therapy because even though it's off-label, the health economics of it look very persuasive, at least on initial blush. So the conversations to date have been very, very positive, and we expect them to continue to trend in the right direction.
It was about a year ago, your team actually invited me down to the clinic in Toronto. So fast forward 12 months later, what can you walk me through as to what goes on day to day? Obviously, there was a tight restriction shutdown with COVID being brand new last summer and everything was pretty quiet. But here we are 12 months later, and I know there's a ton of other clinics that you've opened up across North America, including some marquee cities like Los Angeles and New York. But if I'm walking into these clinics now, say versus 12 months ago, how has it evolved and what could people anticipate or expect if they were to, let's say, be prescribed and attend one?
Yeah, I would say that not much has evolved. The experience we designed from day one to be a very welcoming experience, right? It's really important that people feel at ease before they engage on this journey with us, because if you have a high degree of anxiety or feeling uncomfortable, then the likelihood of having a less than positive experience is higher. So the only difference really these days is that our clinics seem to be busier and busier. More people are coming in, more people, as restrictions ease, as more people are vaccinated. We're still maintaining all the same protocols in terms of COVID precautions that we did from day one, because A, it's the right thing to do in our mind. B, I think it's going to put people at ease because there's a lot of anxiety that's happening as people are reintegrating to society. But besides that, the experience is the same. We still take incredible attention to detail. We make sure you feel comfortable the entire way. You're supported along the way. Even after your treatment program is over, we're still available to you. So it really does look very much the same.
When you say like the clinics are getting busier and busier, and that's maybe what I wanted to allude to, like, are more and more people understanding, educating, learning about it more and more people are talking about it. Do you think that has a lot to do with it, let's say over the past 12 months, or is, are you reading too much into that?
No, I mean, certainly the conversation around psychedelics has gone mainstream. You don't end up with a story on the front cover of the New York Times talking about how psychedelics are a revolution in psychiatry without people sitting up and taking notice. But the other piece of it is that we're showing incredible results. We published a white paper a few months ago about our initial cohort of patients, and patients who complete our treatments tend to report significant improvements in depression and anxiety, from moderate to severe to minimal to non-existent for depression, and from moderate typically to minimal to non-existent in terms of anxiety. And those benefits last for a month, possibly more. The only reason I can't say
huge.
more is simply because we just haven't tracked them that far. But we're talking really meaningful objective as well as subjective reports. The patient experiences, the life outcomes that people have been able to achieve after going through our treatments. It's really eye-opening. It's touching. It's meaningful. It's creating a lot of impact. And so as people talk about their experiences, as people go back to their primary care providers and say, this was an amazing experience and did more for my depression than SSRIs or antidepressants ever have, it's going to continue to evolve. It's going to continue to advance. So it's happening on multiple levels right now.
We've had multiple conversations with you, and we talk about, the ongoing, latest news that's developing. But I have to ask, if we bring this all and we look at the big picture right now, you've been involved in a lot of brand new industries, startup companies that have seen tremendous growth. But this specifically, where do you think this ranks amongst other opportunities that you've had throughout your entire career?
I thought cannabis was going to be a massive opportunity, and certainly it was and continues to be. I mean, we haven't even seen the full potential of the cannabis industry, but I think the potential of the psychedelics industry is far greater, simply in terms, absolutely. I mean, you just have to look at the evidence, right? Ignoring all the potential recreational or wellness uses of psychedelics, just in terms of mental health treatments, the results are so far superior to anything else we have right now for sustained benefit and positivity around the experience. We're talking about psilocybin assisted therapies providing up to 5 years of antidepressant benefits after a single session, 3 MDMA assisted therapy sessions, effectively curing up to 70% of participants in a phase 3 clinical trial. We're talking incredible results. And when you think about the cost to the global economy of depression and anxiety alone, just thinking economically, this is massive. 1 in 4 people are expected to experience a clinically relevant instance of depression and anxiety at some point in their lives. The other 3/4 of people are going to experience depression or anxiety at some point. Now, we all have traumas, we all have life challenges, we all have things to work through. And psychedelics can potentially be impactful for literally everybody in those 2 categories, right? Which is just about everybody on the planet. And so I think the impact could be way larger, and the evidence is way more persuasive, and the interest and the passion. We managed to raise we've raised well over $150 million. With the exception of the last financing, the vast majority of the investors who came in because they either personally or through a friend or family had an experience with psychedelics that they found so transformative that they wanted to make this industry come to life, right? And so it
really pulls on the heartstrings, does it not? So many people take this personally, and it's great. I think everybody's affected. I'm sure you have. I know I have. But this is the meaningful, the impact of it all, is it not?
That's exactly it's self-perpetuating. People have good experiences and they can't help but talk about it, and so that's why I think the amplification of it is truly viral. One person has a good experience, it's going to tell 10 people, and it's just going to go and go and go and go and go, and not everyone's going to do it, and that's perfectly fine. But I think there's a large enough audience of people who need it and who want it, that it's going to become quite significant very quickly.
I couldn't agree with you more. Last thing I wanted to touch on, you touched actually earlier about the back end of 2021 for the performance of the industry, as everybody knows. And this is the one thing I actually really applaud you on, is I've seen you a lot posting on LinkedIn and really, complimenting on other companies within the industry that are making big achievements, which is a nice fresh of breath air for this industry versus say cannabis, but it's very supportive. And what I bring that up is because Compass Pathways is expected to announce its phase 2B endpoint data on its proprietary psilocybin compound with right now in assisted therapy basically in the fourth quarter of this year. And these results are widely anticipated given its scale and the fact that it's the most advanced psilocybin research currently to date in the sector. So if and when these results do come out and they are favorable, will the results, you think, have an impact on your business and the overall industry?
Yeah, absolutely. For two reasons. On our business, we've designed our business to thrive with the rest of the industry, particularly through Field Trip Health and our clinical infrastructure. And we look forward to working with Compass Pathways to help them roll out Compass 360 as it gets approval and start treating people. So it's going to benefit us directly because it's going to be another tool in the arsenal that we can offer through Field Trip Health, but also through Field Trip Discovery and FT104. If Compass's psilocybin is extremely effective, and I think we're all anticipating it'll be extremely effective, then it just increases the likelihood that we're going to find FT104 to be extremely effective as well, because even though it's a different molecule, we're still talking about tryptamines, we're still talking about agonizing the 5-HT2A receptor, we're still talking about similar subjective experiential effects, that their success actually amplifies the likelihood of our success with FT104. And what's so powerful about FT104 is that it's very psilocybin-like, but with a shorter duration of action. So we believe it's just going to be a preferred, not exclusively, but generally preferred to most physicians and patients, because it'll be cheaper and a shorter experience, making it much more accessible to people.
Yeah, it's an interesting compound from what I've reviewed so far. But listen, I appreciate you taking the time to connect with us. Congrats again on the news last week. And
thank you.
Looking forward to a very promising back end. But let's keep in touch and let's have you back on again soon.
As always, it's a pleasure. Good to see you, Chad.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks, Ronan.